Hey everyone, it's ariesjj with you. Today we're going to be continuing on with the build progression tutorial series. Specifically, we'll be covering the Framed Staple Alien Coil. Some people call it the Fralien, I call it the Fralien. There's a million and one different names for it. So don't be surprised if you see it called something, a variation thereof, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or what have you. But the basics behind it is taking the core of a frame staple, and instead of doing a standard Clapton wrap around it, we're going to be doing an alien wrap. Now what this does is it maintains the resistance similar to that of a frame staple, but increases the surface area by adding that alien wrap to it. So let's go ahead and pop on over to the build table and we'll see exactly what we're going to need for today's build. Now first, we're definitely going to be needing a drill for this. You're also going to be needing your normal tools for your wicking and whatnot, which is going to include a pair of pliers for your cotton tuck, a pair of ceramic tweezers to help with the balancing process, something to wrap your coil around, which in this case we'll be using the 3mm mandrel on the Coil Master. You're going to need a pair of pliers to help straighten out your frames. I'll be using the Quill Assist from USA Ohm Meter. You can use ribbon wire or cord locks, whatever you're most comfortable with. You're going to need a good sharp pair of wire snips. A pair of nylon pliers will help to straighten out your finished wire without damaging it. You're going to need the appropriate tool for your particular RDA. You're going to need an ohm meter. Most definitely need an ohm meter for this. Today we'll be building with the gloss red and black Lost Ark Goon. You're going to need cotton and scissors for your wick, and then for our wire today we'll be using 26 gauge frames with 0.4mm ribbon for our core, and we'll be alien wrapping with 36 gauge. So let's pop into Steam Engine and see how we're going to set this up to determine what approximately our final ohm is going to be. Now, for the sake of time, I've gone ahead and built the wire within Steam Engine. As I said, we're going to be using a 3mm inner diameter, and I'm going to be going with approximately 7 wraps. 7 is generally a good number for this particular build that I'm going to be doing in the Goon. For the leg length and the wrap spacing, I generally leave those at default. Now, as we can see, I've got it set up with Kanthal 26 gauge frames. And again, if you're looking down at the finished wire, you're going to want to try to build this in order. So your far side is going to be one frame, the closest side is going to be another frame, and whatever you have in the middle. So I will be doing 4 strands of 0.4mm ribbon, as I said, all Kanthal. And if you need to adjust and add more cores, you can definitely add one by clicking on the plus symbol below the bottom core wire. You can add as many as you need. Just remember that if you go too far away from that 3:1 ratio, you're definitely going to have to do some math. Now for our wrap wire, I'll be using the 36 gauge 316L stainless steel, and that's going to be alien wrapped. Now, because I've got this set up with 26 gauge frames and 4 strands of ribbon wire, each of the strands of ribbon wire is 0.1mm thick. So when you add those together, it comes out equivalent to that of what a standard 26 gauge wire would be. Now, if you differ from this, you're going to have to add up the combination of your 2 frames and the width of all of your ribbon wire stack, and then divide that out by 3 to figure out what you're going to need to do your Clapton wraparound that is going to be decored and turn into your alien. Now, if all goes accordingly with that 3mm inner diameter and the 7 wraps, our per coil resistance should come up to around 0.348. So in a dual coil setup, that's going to come out to about a 0.175, 0.18 approximation. Remember, these numbers are just guideposts. Always ohm check your builds prior to firing, prior to installation. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and clear out the build station and get started with this build. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, and I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance. In case you didn't notice and you're familiar with my videos, normally I use a headset. Well, I've actually got a real mic going now, so I apologize in advance for any variations in the sound. I will do my best to try to compensate and adjust in post-edit, but I apologize if they don't come across quite the way they normally do. But the first thing that we're going to need to do is come up with our D-chord Clapton for our alien wrap. Now, I've already gone ahead and straightened out a piece of 26 gauge, which is what we're going to be doing our Clapton wrap around. So I'm going to go ahead and get this mounted in the drill. In there. Tighten that down, and then we're going to be fusing, or Clapton wrapping, with the 36 gauge stainless steel. So we're just going to loosely wrap it around the L-shaped leg. I'm going to trim off that little bit of excess. And with the case with all alien wraps, you're going to want to spin this in reverse of what you're going to be spinning for your final wrap. So since I'm more comfortable spinning in a over fashion, I'm going to be spinning my Clapton wrap in an under fashion. So the wrap wire is actually going to feed under the core wire and back around the top. So let's go ahead and get this Clapton wrapped up. Now you're going to want to get this as tight as you possibly can. You want to get a nice solid Clapton wrap on that. But I'm going to go ahead and speed this up, and we'll get through this. Okay, so I've got just over a foot Claptoned up. Now, I always prefer to Clapton a little bit extra than too little. I mean, you can always cut off any excess, but it's too late once you've started to add any more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the drill, and I'm just going to hold it right here at the very end where I've finished off the Clapton. And I'm just going to reverse it and give it some spins to kind of loosen up that Clapton from around that core to make it easier to decore it. And it doesn't take much, about 5 seconds or so should be enough. You can kind of get a feel for it across the cores to see if it's springing out enough to where you can actually get it off. Now I'm going to cut this tail off and leave about an inch, give or take, and that's just going to help me identify which side is which for when I go to alien wrap this on. So all we're going to do is we're going to unwrap that that tail from around the core. There we go. And we should be able just to slide that right on off, just like that. And what you're left with is a nice springy D-chord Clapton. Now I will be doing the no stretch method during my wrap, and I will have close-ups. I've gotten a lot of people requesting close-ups of how it feeds into my grip and how it leaves the grip. So I will be having close-ups of it in action. So we will be making those transitions. But now that we've got that taken care of, we need to go ahead and form up the actual core of the frame staple. So we're going to start with our ribbon wire, which, as I said, we're going to be using the 0.4mm Kanthal. And I'm just going to take my spool tamer off. And since I'm doing 4 strands, what I'm actually going to do is just do 2 longer strands and fold those in half. So I'm going to take 2 strands about 20-ish inches. I'm not going to measure this out, but about 20-ish inches for a dual coil setup. Just going to cut that off right about there, and then just unfold another one. Now, if you're using a smaller spool or your wires is spooled tighter and it comes off, you know, a little bent and a little curly, you can give it a little stretch as you're pulling it off the spool, and that will keep it, that will actually straighten it out a little bit. Just be careful not to pull too tight, or else you'll snap in the middle, and you don't want to mess with that. So I've got that put up. Now I'm going to go ahead and get my spool tamer so this doesn't bird nest out on me. These spool tamers really are a lifesaver. You can find them on Amazon, at a lot of your craft and hobby places, but it helps keep your spools under control where they don't bird nest out everywhere. But taking those 2 strands of ribbon wire, we're just going to find the middle point, and I'm just going to kind of guesstimate it, which is going to be right about there. I'm just going to bend that over, and using a little bit of the wire that we wrap with, the 36 gauge, I'm just going to take a small little piece of that and wrap around the bend on this ribbon wire, just to kind of hold it together and hold its shape. And I'm going to create a little loop with this. Now, the importance of that little loop is we're going to actually use that to hold steady inside the swivel setup. Now, some people have been known to freehand this. I haven't perfected the freehand method by any stretch of the imagination, so I will definitely be using swivels for this. But we've got our ribbons stacked. Try to keep your ribbons at the very end nice and evenly cut. If you freehand it, your fold, then you are going to have some that are going to be longer than the others. Just kind of cut them off cleanly, and that's just going to make your binding that much easier whenever you get to that stage. So I think I got them all. There we go. Now for our frame, like I said, we're using the 26 gauge for our frame. You're going to want to cut that off about twice as long as what your cores are, your ribbon cores, and actually leave it a little bit longer than twice. That way you have a little bit extra for your drill to catch onto, so you can bend them out. So I've got, like I said, about 24 inches or so. I'm just going to put that that 26 gauge off to the side. I'm just going to bend a little L and put it in the chuck of the drill so we can get this straightened out. And then with our pliers, we're just going to grab the other end and we're going to pull it tight. And I'm a little cramped with this new mic, so it's going to go off camera just a little bit, but we're just going to pull it tight, give it a few spins, doesn't take much, and just run your fingers down it until you get to the end. Release with the pliers to let that tension loose in your hand, and you end up with a nice straight piece of frame wire. So we're going to put the drill off to the side for just a moment. Get that out of the way. Now, what I normally do is that little L that we bent for straightening it, I'm just going to cut that off so we can get a clean end once we fold this over. Always remember to throw away any clippings that you have right away, because you don't want those to fall on the floor and find them with your toe later on. That always makes for a very bad day. I'm just going to fold this over and give it just a slight little crimp. Now it's going to want to twist on you. That's normal. Just expect that, and just kind of hold them separate with your fingers. And then taking that ribbon core, we're going to line it up into the middle. I have to get this reorganized. Here we go. We're going to want to line this up in the middle of those frames, and then we'll bind those in place with a little bit more of that 36 gauge. Try to make sure that you keep these frames, keep the ribbon vertical, because you don't want them going side to side with the width of them pointing up and down, because that's just going to make it that much harder for you to actually wrap the coil. You want these standing vertically. So I'm just going to pull that tight, give it a nice wrap. Now what I found helps a lot is if you take that binding wire and just kind of feed it through the loop of the ribbon and do like a figure 8 with it. Pull it through that side, back around through the center, and that's going to secure it better to those frames and hold it better in place. Give it another couple wraps, maybe wrap it through and around on each side. So go through and wrap it around on the same side that you're coming from, around, come in from the back. Just whatever it takes just to secure that to where it's not going to come loose on you. Because the last thing you want is for those ribbon cores just to come out and get free on you and start rotating while you're trying to wrap. So now that we've got those lined up and in place, what we're going to do is we're just going to run our fingers down them, trying to keep those nice and vertical, which mine have shifted just ever so slightly. I'm going to give it a little bit of pinch with the nylon pliers, just to kind of straighten it back out just a little bit. There we go. And then just run my fingers down it to get it nice and lined up. And then once you've got it perfectly lined up down here at the bottom, we're going to get Quill Assist, or if you're going to be using ribbon wire, you can use ribbon wire to go ahead and start your binding. But I'm going to be using these Quill Assist, and I'm going to use 3 of them today. One for right there by the swivel, one that's going to stay right by the chuck of the drill, and then the third one is going to be the actual slider on the cores, and it's going to keep these cores nice and lined up for me. So we've got those on there, and we're all prepped up and ready to go and attach this to our swivel. So let me go ahead and get it lined up into the swivel, hooking the swivel hook into both the ribbon and the frame, and then just pulling it nice and tight. I'm going to go ahead and actually bind this very end, just to kind of keep it together inside the chuck of the drill so it doesn't come loose. If you're using more cores, or if your chuck closes down a good bit, you shouldn't have to worry about binding these. My chuck doesn't close down real well, so anything extra that I can get for it to grab onto definitely helps out. Go ahead and cut that off. And then I'm just going to take those frame wires and I'm just going to bend them outwards, one on each side. And each one of those is going to go between 2 of the jaws, just like so. And then tighten down as tight as you can. You don't want these slipping out. There we go. And we're all set up. Now I'm going to go ahead and adjust this to where you guys can better see. Okay. So there you can see my swivel. It's nice and attached. I'm going to take this farthest one, I'm going to slide it all the way down to where it's right up against the swivel. This one is going to stay right up against the chuck of the drill, and then this one is going to float back and forth, you know, up, down as we go ahead and do this wrap with this alien wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end that we had that was at the chuck, for our alien, or for our initial clapton. I'm just going to stretch it just a little bit and wrap it around one of the frame legs. And I'm just going to spin this. Remember, we're going to spin in the opposite direction of how we did our initial clapton. I'm just going to trap it on this side of that that bobble, and I'm going to push this one in. That's going to slide, and we're just going to go on down the line. Okay, now if you happen to make a mistake, just like any other alien, there's really no fixing it. Now, I've goofed up a little bit far, or I think far enough down the line where I can actually get a coil out of that. But yeah, if there's no fixing mistakes on aliens, you just got to keep going. And as you can see, I ran out of clapton right there. So I'm actually going to have to go through and make another strand because I messed up just enough and I didn't have quite enough clapton wrap to knock it out. But I'm going to go ahead and make up a secondary strand to go ahead and knock out that enough to make that second coil that I'm going to want. So we're going to go ahead and cut it off here. I'm going to make up that second strand and we'll go ahead and get to wrapping it. Okay, so we've got the secondary strand wrapped up. Now again, I'm using a 3mm mandrel on the Quill Master. You're not going to need the cap for this. Just take it, hold it tightly against the mandrel, and adding just the slightest bit of pressure, just wrap it around and get your wraps in. Now like I said, we're doing 7 wraps, dual coil. It's 4, 6, and we're going to have just enough for our 7th. Oops, came a little bit loose there. That's it, just enough for our 7th wrap. And then we're just going to crook off that leg and get that at a 90-degree angle to where it's going to sit nice and flush and level in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to pre-trim these legs to where they'll fit nice and smooth inside that goon. I'm going to pull this just a little bit to make sure that I get any excess slack out of that line. There we go. And then to pre-trim, I've already got the second one wrapped. To pre-trim, all we're going to do is just pretend like we're mounting it, and then cut off the excess straight within, for the goon especially, straight within, right up against the posts. So we've got that cut off nice and smooth. Do the same on the other leg. And then we're just going to take that one out and we're going to mount in the second one and do the same thing with it. Okay, so with both of those pre-trimmed and ready to go, we're just going to go ahead and mount them at the same time within the goon. And just like you're going to tighten down the lug nuts on a wheel, we're just going to give each screw a couple spins to try to balance down these clamps in an equal fashion. You don't want to have too much pressure on any particular side of the clamps. You want them to be nice and even for optimal contact. Okay, so we've got that mounted, and then if you take the mandrel out of your coil master, or if you just have a regular screwdriver, just take it and just give it a little pull to get these leveled out and sitting even with each other. Just do any little micro adjustments that you have to do before you actually start burning them in. This is going to give you a lot easier of a time to work out any hot spots that may be in them. So we've got that balanced out. Let's go ahead and get the coil master reassembled. Now we said, Steam Engine said that this should come out to about a 0.175-ish. Now pre-fire is going to ohm in a lot lower than what our finished ohm level is. So let's see what it comes out at. Okay, and we can see that it's right around that 0.167-ish range, 0.168. That with the USA ohm meters, that thousandths of an ohm is definitely going to bounce. I mean, I can sit here and tap it and it'll bounce all day long. But it's sitting pretty close to that 0.168. That will go up once we get this balanced, but we know that this is definitely going to be safe to fire on pretty much any mod out there. Most of them have a 0.1 cutoff. I'll be firing this in on the SXQ Mini, which has a 0.06, I believe, is the bottom range. So we're well within the limits of the mod for this one. But we're going to go ahead and get this off of here and get it ready to get fired in. We're just going to get it read in, and of course there it is. The SX is reading it at a 0.16. I do expect that to jump up to a 0.17, 0.18 once we've got this all balanced in. Now I've got this set at 65 watts, so let's go ahead and get this burned in and going evenly. Okay, and there we go. That side's actually burning just a little bit fast, so let's get that one last adjustment. And there we go. So we're going to go ahead and let that sit. I'm going to pause the video here and let that cool off for just a little bit, and we'll come right back and wick it up. Okay, so we should be cooled off now. There we go, yep. So now we said that this was going to come out to about a 0.175, 0.18. Let's see what it actually ended up on the same ohm meter that we initially tested on. Let's get this screwed on here. And right there is right at that 0.178 to 0.18 mark. So we're spot on where Steam Engine said we were going to be. Now, again, remember, Steam Engine is just a guidepost. Don't rely on it. Always ohm check your builds. It doesn't matter how many times you built something. Always ohm check it. So we're going to go ahead and get this put back on the mod and get this wicked up and ready to go. Now, being that these are 3mm coils, I'm going to be using approximately 1/3 of the width of a pad of Muji. Now, these are the 50mm by 60mm pads. I'm going to use approximately 1/3 pad per coil. And then we're just going to take, like we normally do, and pull off that matted outer layer on both sides of each strip. because all those do is they impede on the capillary action of the wick itself. So we're going to get this, just give it a nice little roll between our fingers. And just as you're pushing it through, just give it a little twisting motion, and it should come through just fine. You want just enough tension to give the coil a little wiggle, but you don't want it to be able to pull the coil out of place. If it's starting to pull it out of place, that means you've got too much cotton. If it's freely flowing within the coil, that means that there's not enough. And then we're going to trim this up to where the tails of the cotton are just long enough to reach the deck. Any more and you'll crowd the underside of the coil, and it won't be able to get the adequate airflow that it needs. There we go. And then we're going to repeat the process on the other side. Okay, now we're just going to take our offset angle tweezers. We're just going to fluff up these tails just a little bit. And we're just going to set them down into the well of the RDA, right up against the wall. Making sure that you leave plenty of clearance underneath the coils for airflow. Get that pushed off to the side. And what you should end up with is being able to basically see all the way through to the other side. You want plenty of airflow up underneath those coils. And then it's just a matter of juicing it up. Today we're going to be using Higgy's Last Straw V1 from e-cigs. And we're just going to get these coils nice and doused to let that start soaking into the middle of the coil while we gently saturate the tails of the cotton. Always remember, you don't need to flood your deck. Just enough juice on the cotton to saturate it, but not enough to drown it. The more juice you put, the more likely you are to get spit back from it. Just paint that coil just a little bit more, and then just pulse it gently to work it into the center of the coil. And that should be just about enough. Always remember to adjust your airflow, which on the Goon, I prefer to have mine about 2/3 of the way open. Get it capped up, and I'll see you back up top. Okay, so that is the Fralien, the Framed Staple Alien, the Fralien, whichever name you choose to go by. It's a very high production coil, very dense flavor, definitely dense cloud production, but the flavor on it is just immaculate. It gives you that fullness of the e-liquids that you're vaping on, especially in the creams and custards. Those come out really, really well. The fruits and the savories are good, but the creams and the custards are really where this coil shines. Remember, a little bit of practice, a fair amount of wire, but you can get this too. Just take your time, start off slow, and just work through it. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, well, give it a thumbs down. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I try to put out new videos every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern right here, so check back and see what comes up next. If you have any suggestions on how to improve the videos or suggestions on coils that you would like to see built in this series, go ahead and leave them down below. Remember, it's not the cigarettes you smoke, but the ones that you don't smoke that matter. I don't care if you're vaping a 0.1 or a 10 ohm coil. As long as it's safe and it satisfies you, that's all that matters. Because at the end of the day, is your vaping experience. Enjoy your journey, but do it safely.